Welcome to INK&BLOOD. This is our first podcast series. My name is Emre Uslu.
Mine is Kani Zulan.
And what are we going to do?
We want to talk about the war in Gaza, the Kurdish street, the Kurdish perspective. The war has entered its 9th month. Relative to the other conflicts, it's being covered well. It's almost always headline news in the Washington Post and the New York Times around the world. But it's a war that's unfolding in the Middle East, and there are close to 40 to 50 to 55 million Kurds living there. And we wanted to tackle the issue of how they view this war. This is not just a local war between the Palestinians and the Israelis. It has ramifications for people not just in the region, but also around the world.
And also, there are some confusion about the Kurdish position relative to other players in the region, be it Qatar, Iran, or Turkey. Media covered their position and where they stand. But when it comes to Kurds, actually, there are some confusion as far as I see. So it would be nice to see and explain to the Western audience where, if there is any unified the Kurdish stance against the war or support of the war. And Kani, why are you going to talk about the Kurds? And can you also please tell us who the Kurds are? Imagine that there are some people who may watch this podcast that they don't know who the Kurds are and where they live, and why are you the right person to tackle this issue?
Well, I don't know if I'm the right person, but I am an activist based in Washington, D.C. I follow the Kurdish issue very closely because of my work. I run a nonprofit. The Kurds actually don't share a border with Israel or with Palestine. We are further north, but we live in the internet age, and the news is no longer local per se. Many of the states in the region have a position. Kurdistan is not free. We're part of Syria, we're part of Iraq, we're part of Iran, we're part of Turkey. Some people may think, whatever, let's say, Turkish president thinks, 20 to 30 million Kurds in Turkey think like him. But that's not really the case. There are Kurds who disagree with him, and there are Kurds who agree with him. So we thought we could unpack this, give a Kurdish perspective on the war that's unfolding there. And if it grows, if the conflict gets out of hand, if Lebanon gets involved, if Iran gets involved, it will definitely have deep ramifications for the Kurds in the region.
Yes, and also the Kurds are the other, as you mentioned, the only other group of people who do not have a state, just like Palestinian. And many people think that, well, because of this nature of statelessness of both nations, many people assume that Kurds would support Palestine. In fact, in 1970s and 80s, many Kurds actually went and joined PLO to fight against Israel. But it seems that in these days, tides shifting. And I saw some protests and some Kurdish people, especially in online platforms like X or other platforms, they're openly supporting Israel. And can you please tell us who are they? Are they the majority? And where the Kurdish stands against this war? And who are the supporters of Israel? And who are the supporters of Palestine or supporters of Hamas?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the Kurds of the Iraq, for example, and the Kurds of Syria, for example, have been hurt by Arabs, by Damascus in Syria, and by Baghdad in Iraq. So the Kurds haven't been hurt by Israel; they have been hurt by Arabs, and so unfortunately, the Palestinian leadership is in cahoots with the leadership of the countries in the region. I personally make a distinction between the people on the ground and their leaders in the capitals. The leaders in the capitals are in cahoots with one another. Saddam used to support Arafat, and Arafat was able to travel around the Arab world. I think on the ground, if you look at if you, let's say, walk down the street in West Bank in Ramallah and talk to average people what they want, they will say they want freedom. And if you walk down the street in Halabja and ask the Kurds what they want, they will say they want freedom too. But the problem we have is the Palestinian leaders don't want the Kurds to be free. Israeli leaders don't want Palestinians to be free. Like, for example, Netanyahu doesn't believe in two-state solution. His dream is really to have West Bank incorporated into Israel proper, and Gaza to be like an open-air prison. And that's the dream of Erdogan relative to the Kurds too. And that's the dream of the leaders in Baghdad or the leaders in Damascus relative to the Kurds too. So you need to, I kind of need to bring that up with you, because at the bottom level, freedom is a desire of the Palestinians and it's a desire of the Kurds. At the leadership level, you have Erdogan opposing Kurdish leadership, Kurdish freedom, and you have Netanyahu opposing Palestinian freedom, and you have this this duplicity, this hypocrisy, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned that if you go and ask people in Ramallah, they would ask, they would tell, well, they want freedom. If you ask any Palestinian, do they want freedom for the Kurds? I'm not talking about the leader and the Palestinian in the street. Yes, they want freedom for themselves. And do they want freedom for the Palestinian? And the same thing, if you go on the street of Diyarbakir or Arbil or Suleimania and ask them, do you want Palestinian to be free? And ordinary leader,
yeah.
Put the politics aside. And how would they react?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I, for example, want Palestinians to be free. I want a two-state solution. And I also want Kurds to be free. And I want, Kurdistan to be politically an entity. But there are Kurds who have been hurt so badly by the Arabs, and they see Palestinian leadership expressing dislike towards the Kurdish struggle for freedom. They equate that with disliking Palestinians. I think that is wrong. I think they should make a distinction between the Palestinian leadership, like in PA, Palestinian Authority, and Hamas leadership. And I think, I don't think I'm in minority. I think there are a lot of people like me who want, freedom for the Kurds and freedom for the Palestinians. The problem is at the leadership level, you don't have that agreement. Like Netanyahu and Erdogan don't see eye to eye. Erdogan wants, for example, Kurds to be on a leash in Turkey, and Netanyahu wants Palestinians to be on a leash in West Bank, in East Jerusalem, and in Gaza.
Yeah, I think the question that I asked previously, that who are the supporters of Israel, when we look at the social media and protests in Europe and United States, we saw some Kurds are actually waving Israeli flags. And can you tell us, because from the Turkish nationalists, for instance, I hear that, well, the Kurds are actually supporting Israel while we're just supporting Palestine and so on and so forth. So they use this as an excuse to suppress them. And who are actually the one who support Israel?
For example, in the last 9 months, there have been demonstrations in Europe. Even last 2 years, let's say, demonstrations. There are always demonstrations in Europe that are conducted by Kurds. And when you are there, or when you see the videos of these demonstrations, you see Kurds holding Israeli flags and waving them. That kind of rubs the wrong way for a lot of Arabs. Why are they supporting like Israelis? I mean, I think Netanyahu openly says he wants to see a free and independent Kurdistan. For example, President Shimon Peres, when he came to Washington, he met with, I believe, just before he stepped down, he met with Barack Obama. He said, "Don't forget the Kurds." So he pleaded with the American leadership. And I think, if you ask for my personal opinion, in the long run, it's in the Israelis' best interest to have an ally like Kurdistan, because Kurds have different national interests. They have different aspirations than Syria, than Iraq, than Turks, than Persians. So Israel right now is kind of alone there. Yes, it has a peace treaty with Egypt. Yes, it has a peace treaty with Jordan, but it doesn't have a peace treaty with Syria. It doesn't have a peace treaty with Lebanon. It doesn't have a peace treaty with Iran. It doesn't have a peace treaty with Iraq. So in the long run, I mean, I don't think Israelis are temporary there. They have deep, they have in the last 70 years, 80 years, they have developed deep roots. They're a superpower now relative to the other countries in the region. And I think in the long run, the countries, if possible, they should iron out their differences and reach peace, because peace has higher dividends than the war does, as we see it in Gaza.
Yeah, I understand the Israeli perspective. Of course, divide and rule. If you're
Yes.
Israeli leader, you would want to have divided Middle East and less powerful neighborhoods, and therefore it's more secure. And I also understand the Kurdish perspective, especially the politicians, and who wanted to have powerful country or powerful lobby, Israeli lobby, would want to support Kurds in the West. I think one of the area that they would use Israeli support. But don't forget, in 1990s, while Netanyahu was in rhetoric was stating that they were supporting Israel. I mean, they were supporting the Kurds, but they were also selling weapons to the Turks. And when the Turks were simply burning down all the villages and bombing the mountains of Kurdistan, and all this stuff were, being possible because of the Israeli armament technology, and they supported actually the Turkish military. And Turkey's relations with Israel was, I think, the closest in 1990s. At the same time, behind the curtains, and they were saying that we wanted Kurds to get independent. I mean, don't you see hypocrisy over here?
It was the misfortune of the Kurds to have a leadership that was at odds with the West. Israelis could support Turkey because Turkey was a member of NATO. The Kurdish leadership in 90s, was hardcore left, hardcore socialist, and that kind of didn't have a lot of presence in Europe or in Washington. So Israel said, "I'm going to support Turkey." It was fine, and it did support Turkey, and Turkey managed to destroy even more Kurdish villages and uproot more Kurdish inhabitants. But I think I need to draw your attention to something else, though. I think, I personally feel Netanyahu, feels he's too strong. For example, he was able to hold a meeting in the Congress in spite of Obama, when Obama was in the White House. And now on July 24, he's going to come to the Congress again. And in spite of Biden, Biden, he didn't even consult Biden. So I think, Netanyahu could think that he could have his cake and eat it too. But this is not how it unfolds. There are other things going on in the region. You cannot hold the whole region, like you cannot, I don't think it's a good idea to hold the whole region against you or to put the whole region against you. And yet, this is what we have. You know, you have Hamas being supported by Iran, even though Iran is a Shiite state and Hamas is a Sunni state. And you have the conflict that is, as we said at the outset, entering its 9th month and no end in sight.
I mean, yeah, let's bring it to the people in the street again. So yes, in the higher level of politics and strategical game playing is always there. But let's see that there are some Kurds actually rallied in Diyarbakir and Batman, two big cities in Turkey, Kurdish cities in Turkey, in support of Hamas, not Palestine or Palestinian, but Hamas. There were big flyers and big demonstrations. Even the kids were wearing Hamas uniforms. All those demonstrations. Former Kurdish Hezbollah, which is nothing to do with the Lebanese Hezbollah, but now they are organized under Hudapar. And can you please tell us who are they, and are they majority, minority among the Kurdish groups, and what is their relations with the Turkish state? Were they supporting Hamas because of ideological reasons, or because Turkish state support Hamas and therefore because they are ally with Erdogan and they're kind of reflecting the same rhetoric with Erdogan? Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, no, the demonstrations that you're talking about did take place. I mean, inside Turkey, Kurdish some supporters of Hamas were able to unfurl large banners from the walls of Diyarbakir. But the government didn't do anything about it. You need to kind of underline that part too. Yes. If they had unfurled a big banner of Öcalan, the police would have been there right away. But when they unfurled a big banner of a Hamas leader, whose name I'm forgetting now, who became very famous apparently in the initial months, the government let that banner to stay there, and then the supporters of Hamas felt even more encouraged, so they went and hung the same banner from the bridge from between Diyarbakir and Mardin. If Kurds were totally free, and let's say or relatively free, like in Iraqi Kurdistan, and they did that, I would say, okay, well, that's a sentiment, a Kurdish sentiment that is free. But in Turkey, I would have to say that Hudapar is a Erdogan project, or it's a government project. It was basically established to fight the Kurds, the liberal Kurds, the leftist Kurds, the socialist Kurds. And you could say the same about Hamas. Palestinian Authority believes in two-state solution. Hamas doesn't believe in two-state solution. Netanyahu preferred Hamas over Palestinian Authority because he thought Hamas doesn't believe in two-state solution, and Netanyahu thought he could forever keep them down. And I think Erdogan inside Turkey is playing with fire too. He's supporting, let's say, Hudapar, and saying, they can express themselves and be supporters of Hamas. But tomorrow, Hudapar could defy the central government in Baghdad, just like Hamas is defying the central government in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem.
Yeah, also, I think we should also remind that the Hudapar was founded, actually supported by Iran when it was founded in 1970s. And many of their leaders were actually hosted by Iran and received some training. And recently, however, because Erdogan's politics, and there are some separation between Iran supporters and Turkish supporters, and some of their leaders are in Iran. So there is also a rift, and some would consider that the Hezbollah normally in 1990s would have been a part of Iranian-backed resistance. But today, Hezbollah is, or Hudapar is much more Turkey-centric, or
right.
under the control of Erdogan regime, and we needed to underline that, and also we needed to, I think, make it clear that Hezbollah and Erdogan is supporting Hamas, not Palestine or not Palestinian. And we needed to make those distinctions. When it comes to, if you go and ask any people, an ordinary Kurd in the street, most of them would say, well, they would support Palestine because they are suffering. When it comes to diaspora in Europe and in the United States, most Kurds would say, well, because of this issues and political issues, as you mentioned, and they would support Israel because Israel is the only country in the region, and they are openly supporting Kurdish cause as well. So that is because I have heard, especially in Islamist circles, and they were blaming Kurds that they are supporting Israel. And can you tell us that by supporting Israel, do Kurds, especially those who are diaspora, I'm not saying that the majority, do they lose a higher ground, moral ground, when actually Israel is being killing this many people, especially including civilians and women, children, in the long run? Would this backfire?
Yeah. No, I don't think it's smart to support Israel the way the war is unfolding right now. Having said that, I mean, I want to be open about condemning what Hamas did.
Absolutely.
So I want that to be stated as well. I would support Israeli. I would welcome Israeli support, for example, for the establishment of Kurdish freedom or Kurdish state. The problem I have with that, as I said earlier, Netanyahu doesn't believe in the freedom of Palestinians. So to me, that becomes suspect. It's just like, I don't think Palestinians should believe in Erdogan because he doesn't believe in Kurdish rights. A better test for Palestinians is, does Erdogan believe in Kurdish rights? Then he should support the Palestinians. So, but the problem we have is the Middle East is full of hypocritical leaders, people who think short term, people who don't practice strength with vision or power with compassion. They say, Israel says just everything for me, everything, my national interest. Turks say everything for me. I mean, an analogy that comes to my mind: imagine you're taking the metro in New York, Manhattan, or you're taking the subway in Washington, and there are like 2 seats. I mean, there's a seat available, and then you have a person sitting in 2 seats. And, Israel is sitting in 2 seats.
Not uncommon.
And Turkey is sitting in 2 seats. There is room enough for both Kurds and Turks inside Turkey. There's room enough for but the problem is Erdogan doesn't want to give up from the Kurdish seat, and Israel doesn't want to give up from the Palestinian seat. So you have the conflict, that is going to unfold from the river to the river. From the river to the sea, we have 14 million people. 7 million of whom are Israelis, like Jews, and 7 million are Palestinians. I would venture to you that land, if properly managed, is enough for 14 million, and it is enough for 28 million. But when you have nationalism, when you have greed, when you have only my people matter, then you have the chaos of Gaza, and you have the chaos of Diyarbakir, you have the chaos of Shirnak, you have the chaos of Nusaybin. Your background is Turkish, my background is Kurdish, and I'm happy we're doing this podcast. I have a question for you. Not long ago, Turkey was in charge of Palestine. Imagine the First World War never happened, and imagine Turks were still in charge of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and Gaza. And the Palestinians now in 2020, wanted their freedom, and they attacked Turks and they killed, hundreds and kidnapped civilians. What do you think Turkish reaction would be?
Well, it's a tough question. I don't think that Turkish reaction would not be much different than the reaction of Israel.
Exactly.
I mean, because both Israel and Turkey established based on fear of losing lands or fear of homeland, because the devastation of Ottomans and so on and so forth. Israel was created with under the shadow of course, the Holocaust, genocide, and so on and so forth. I don't think the very foundation of these two nation states are, normal, like the foundation of the United States or many European countries. And in a way, this fear is still running the sentiments among the ordinary people as well as the ruling elites. And therefore, I don't expect, the Turks would be much even ruthless. I don't know how they manage it. Of course, there are many ifs in this situation. If, Palestine is becoming, if Turkey was under, just nation state, certainly Turkey would act somewhat similar to Israel. But if it is more like federal Ottoman state, it would be a different story. But we also have historical record how Jamal Pasha reacted in Syria and in Lebanon during the World War I and earlier than that. So it was not so different than Israel and Israeli reaction. However, this does not justify what Israel has been doing.
Let me ask you another question.
Sure.
The conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis is not just the fate of two people, but also two religions. You have the Jews and you have the Muslims. The conflict between the Turks and the Kurds is, yes, you have two people, the Kurds and the Turks, but both are Muslims. In your opinion, your background is security. I have two questions for you. One is, which one is more intractable? Two, if you had Netanyahu's ear, let's say for an hour, and again your background is security, what would you tell him? What would you recommend to him to solve this issue?
Well, if I had a chance to tell Netanyahu, I would ask him to resign. First, I don't think with the existence of Netanyahu's, mentality, this problem is solved. I think much of the problem is domestic, to be honest, and similar to the Erdogan. Erdogan was, in favor of peace process when it was serving in his own interest. And later on, he was, destroying all the cities, Jizre, Diyarbakir, Sur, and all others, when it was serving his own interest. I don't know how much of it is actually national security and how much of it is the political security of the ruling people like Erdogan and Netanyahu. So I don't think with Netanyahu in Israel and Erdogan in Turkey would want to solve this problem. As long as they are able to manage the situation, they would prefer to have this conflict going on.
Got it.
Unfortunately, I don't know if it answers the question that you raised. When it comes to the religion issue, well, I have a different take. When it comes to the Kurdish-Turkish relations, it is much more complicated, Kani. Yes, there are some nationalist sentiment, but the Kurds at the same time get married with the Turks. There is no problem. There are many Kurdish girls are marrying with the Turkish boys, and Turkish girls are marrying with the Kurdish boys. And there is, at the society level, this was not an issue. But when it comes to Alevis, for instance, Alevis do not marry with Sunnis. You know this. It doesn't matter whether Kurdish Alevi or Turkish Alevi. And at the societal level, that religious divide is much more pronounced than the nationalist divide. I think the nationalist divide is among the political elites who's actually being able to manipulate or rule the society or lead the society, but on the surface. So I think the religious differences is much more pronounced, and it is easy to manipulate religious separation than the national separations in the Middle East. And when we look at all the people's reaction, actually people in the street, and when you go to Istanbul and you will see the Kurds and Turks are living in the same apartment, right? And there is no difference. But when you see that there is a tension among political elites or the ruling class or the state who wanted to mobilize people around a certain cause, certainly Kurdish nationalism or Turkish nationalism is a button to press. And this is what they are doing. And similar to, again, and Israel and Palestine, and whenever they needed to move the grass, right? What was it they were saying? And they go in and kill a couple of hundred Hamas terrorists or Gazans and then come back. And it is really inseparable how much of it is a domestic needs or how much is actually a national security. I am so pessimistic about especially the Kurds in Turkey, because it is obviously confusing. So sometimes they just use this as an excuse. I hope this answers your question.
I'll say two things. One is, I think the Turkish-Kurdish question is easier to solve. I think if you, let's say silence for a minute Ankara, an average villager in Manisa and an average villager in Diyarbakir, if you bring them together, I think they'll get along fine. I don't think they have such an enmity towards one another. Yeah. But if you take a villager in Gaza or in West Bank and have him meet somebody in Tel Aviv, I think the conflict is much more real. I think enmity is deeper. But I want to say one other thing. In 1930s, Einstein visited the region and corresponded with the Jews as well as Arabs. And he has an observation that, if after 2,000 years we cannot get along with the Palestinians, that means we have learned nothing from our history. His solution was an 8-person committee for Palestinians, for Jews, each having veto power over the other, and then working out together. I think he also believed in, I would say, based on the letter that he wrote to the Palestinian representatives as well as the Israeli Jewish representatives, is he believed in the biblical injunction to those much is given, much is expected. Einstein believed that the Jews with their European education, with their advanced degrees, could help the Palestinians without cheating them, without playing with them. But unfortunately, successive leaders in Israel have tried to push the West Bank, basically cheat the Palestinians of their land. And then you have the conflict that we have, and it doesn't look like we have an end in sight. It looks like this is ongoing until you have leaders with vision, until you have a world more interested in resolving this than we have today.
Yeah, unfortunately, Einstein solved the mystery of universe, but could not solve the mystery in the Middle East. I think it would be an excellent solution. I think, to be honest, there is the only realistic solution to bring those people. But as you pointed out, that the enmity is so deep between the two, and I don't know if it is realistic. Just one, I know we're just over time, but just one more question about the Iran's position. I know that Iran has bombed a couple of places inside Kurdistan in Iraq, and What do Iran want? Was it really the Mossad's activity, and why Iran was bombing the Kurdistan? Is it really about the Israel, or was it just a message to the Kurds that don't go too close to?
Well, I think Iran knows that Israel is a power to be reckoned with in the region, and that the Kurds can get a lot of help from them. So it was a message to Kurds: stay away from Israel. It was really not a message to Israelis. Israelis live, where they live. Iran could have sent the missiles there, but it didn't. It sent the missiles to Iraqi Kurdistan. Iran, is throwing its weight around. It's, wants to be taken seriously in the region. Sometimes leaders look for trouble, and sometimes they find them too. So if this war gets out of hand, we could have a different Iran. In 1914, for example, when the war started in Poland, some Poles joined the German army, some Poles joined the Austrian army, some Poles joined the Russian army. 4 years later, Poland became independent. I'm not saying this is going to happen in the Middle East, but if Iran is definitely attacked, let's say by Israel, and US goes to Israeli help, the mullahs, goodbye. They will not be able to stand there. And Iran is a majority state, meaning Arabs, Azeris, Kurds, and Baluch are more than the Persians inside Iran. If Iran wants to have stability inside Iran, Iran needs to give these groups their rights. Otherwise, it's sitting it's living in a glass house, and it could get hurt.
Yeah, from the glass house, I think they are bombing around. I don't know. I don't know if it is helping or hurting them again. Connie, thank you very much. I know this is our first episode, and I think it was informative. It was excellent. I hope people like it. And if they like it, and please subscribe to our channel, and we'll continue once a week, and we're going to come and discuss one of the issues one at a time, and hopefully you guys like it.
Thank you.
Thank you.